I waited bitterly for Shijin for 3 years, but never received a single letter in reply. The night he returned home, heavy rain poured down. I carried a lantern to search for him, and happened upon him discussing me with a noble lady. She is of lowly birth, and her father is gone. Why should you care about my engagement to her? A thick stack of letters fell between the two of them, one every 10 days, never once missed. All were letters Shijin had written to her. I stood there stunned for a long while, then turned and tossed the extinguished lantern on the shore, boarding a departing boat. Later I heard that the waters rose that night. Shijin, who had always been restrained and proper, clutched a broken lantern and jumped into the river like a madman, searching for some girl he'd been betrothed to since childhood. Rain fell at midnight, soaking the green gauze window. I was writing to Shijin again, when father was on his deathbed years ago. He told me to take the marriage contract and find the Shia family. Shijin and I had been betrothed since childhood. Though his temperament was rather cold, he was willing to patiently teach me to read with lowered brows. The Shia family gradually declined, and 3 years ago Shijin left to seek opportunities. Before leaving, he asked if I'd be willing to become a study companion for the young lady of the Jiang family. At that time, grandmother Xia was ill, and I thought that if I took a position as a study companion, it would naturally lighten the burden on Shijin's shoulders. So I nodded in agreement. He praised me as a good girl. Unable to help himself, he reached out and stroked the top of my head. When Xiao-chan goes to the Jiang residence, learn some proper manners, so you'll be ready to manage the household in the future. However, Jiang Yuntan was not an easy girl to get along with. The 3 years I spent as her study companion were very difficult. She often made me write for her. If the writing was poor and drew the teacher's scolding, she would punish me by making me copy books. But once, when the writing was good, and the teacher praised it in class as having the style of a great master, she came back and poured the ink from the inkstone over my head, looking at me sideways with mockery. Zhengxi, what are you, stealing my spotlight? Do you think you are worthy? The ink got in my eyes, stinging me to tears. Her maid beside her said pointedly, "What Miss doesn't want, thrown away and discarded, you are not worthy of having it either." I could have refused to endure it, but the Jiang family's power was immense. If I offended the noble daughter of the Jiang family, wouldn't Shijin's future path become even harder? So I endured it through gritted teeth. Yet Jiang Yuntan seemed to find even more amusement in it. She dipped her brush in ink and wrote 2 characters on my cheeks, one on the left and one on the right. Little toad. The brush handle lifted my chin, her gaze heavy. What, little Chan? I think the character toad suits you better, disgusting like a warty toad. The others all covered their mouths and laughed. Isn't that right? Such a poor and pathetic look. Little Chan was the courtesy name Shijin gave me. That year when I came of age, grandmother said that since Shijin was my betrothed, he should naturally give me a courtesy name. Shijin said the Chan, in Little Chan was the Chan from Chanwan. It means the moon in the sky. I am not a toad. That night, I bit my pen holder and wrote all these things in a letter to complain to Shijin. Big tears fell onto the letter paper. I wanted to ask him if I could stop being Miss Jiang's study companion. Also, I didn't want to be called Xiao-chan anymore. He never replied to that letter. At the time, I thought he was probably too busy and didn't have time to read my letter. When he comes back, naturally, he'll find a way to back me up. I didn't expect that before I could send out the letter in my hand. Shijin actually came back. 3 years apart, he'd gotten much thinner, but his looks had become even more refined. In his crane cloak, he looked even more elegant and handsome. He stood in the somewhat shabby courtyard in his fine silk robe and jade belt. I fell silent for a moment looking at him. Shijin was the first to break the silence. He stopped under the flower trellis and asked me from an arm's length away, "Those few crabapple trees that used to be here, why are they gone?" Those few crabapple trees in the courtyard were ones we'd planted together back then. During the 3 years he was away from home, I'd written many letters. That autumn, there was too much rain, and the crabapples in the courtyard rotted at the roots. Me days were very dull, with nothing new or interesting. I'd even told him about trivial matters like this. So it turned out, he really hadn't read a single one. Picking at the hem of my skirt with my fingertips, I spoke up awkwardly. The second year after you left, the haitang tree died. I wrote to you about it. My vision was blurry and I couldn't make out his expression. All I heard was a sigh. Xiao Chan. You know how it is. I've been very busy out there. 3 years of swallowed grievances. And seeing this person again, the bitterness in my chest seemed to spread all the way up to my nose. I stared at the empty flower stand and bit my lip. Have you been doing okay these 3 years, actually? I haven't been doing so well. Miss Jifeng keeps bullying me. You know, there was one time Shifei J furrowed his brow at me. Girls fussing over little things, you need to be more open-minded. Why bother taking it so seriously? The moisture in my eyes was forced back. The words at the tip of my tongue stopped. I stared at him blankly. For a moment I couldn't say a single thing. Maybe he realized it was too soon, that he shouldn't be this harsh with me on our first meeting. Shifi J Fen reached out and patted my shoulder. Xiao Chen, you've taken such good care of grandmother these 3 years. Thank you. Hurried footsteps interrupted us. Simone whispered a few words in his ear, and he turned to smile at me. I still have important matters to attend to. I'll come see you later tonight. All the way until evening, Shifei J still hadn't come back. Outside the window, the night rain pattered softly. The old lady coughed twice. I quickly helped her lie down and blew out the candle, thinking that Shijin had yet to return. I asked the messenger and went to look for him with an umbrella and lantern. I thought Shijin was meeting guests at the pavilion by the river. But I never imagined he was actually having a secret rendezvous with another girl. The lamplight shone brilliantly, illuminating a familiar face. It was none other than Zhang Yuntan. He was so shocked I covered my mouth. I watched them from a corner beyond the light's reach. A thick stack of letters lay between the two of them. All written by Shi Jin to her. Zhang Yuntan smiled and asked him to read them to her. He wrote, "The south of the Yangtze is full of misty rain, the rainfall long and heavy. What a pity I couldn't enjoy it with you. The northwest desert stretches with endless yellow sand, yet the sunset is exceptionally magnificent. Since you can't see it, I'll paint this beautiful scenery for you." 1 letter every 10 days, he never missed a single one. A thick stack, not even one was written to me. The thickening rain and mist dampened my skirt. The cold creeping up from my ankles. I don't know how long I stood there. Long enough that my legs grew sore. A single short sentence concealed 3 years of day after day anticipation and disappointment. She poured out her grievances every 10 days without fail, writing to him about every little detail of her days. But his pen and ink never belonged to her. All that tender sharing, all that sincere concern was given to someone else. The river wind made the candlelight flicker. Si Jin stood behind Zhang Yuntan, leaning down to hold her hand, patiently teaching her to write. Zhang Yuntan turned her head, her lips brushing past his right cheek. Her tone was teasing. "It is so late, and you are still not going back. Aren't you afraid your fiancé fire will worry?" My hand holding the lantern clenched so hard it turned white. It felt like even my breathing had stopped. Shijin paused his brush, laughing very softly. "How could she be as important as you? You've spent 3 years together day and night, and you are engaged to be married. Don't you have even the slightest feelings for her?" He nonchalantly dipped his brush in the ink from the inkstone, continuing to write without pause. "She is of lowly birth and has lost her father. Why should you care about my engagement to her? If you hadn't needed a study companion, why would I have taught her in the first place?" Zhang Yuntan reached out to caress Shijin's face. "Of course I trust you. When you sent her over back then, you didn't hesitate for even a moment. These 3 years I endured by thinking of how good he was to me, his gentle eyes and brows when he patiently taught me. When I fell asleep doing my assignments, he fanned me for half an afternoon. But even teaching me was only because of Zhang Yuntan. Belatedly, I realized my face was wet. He reached up to wipe it in a daze, not knowing if it was rain or tears. Me palm hurt badly from the sting. Looking down, I'd already drawn blood from digging my nails in. Actually, I didn't want to cry. Tears disobeyed and fell on the old scar on my wrist that had been burned by candlelight. That was when Zhang Yuntan got angry and deliberately burned me while making me hold the candle for her. Burns shouldn't touch water, but the Shia family couldn't afford servants at that time. I still had to brew medicine for old Madam Shi and wash clothes for both of us. Chilblains and burns together. The pain pierced to the bone. I couldn't sleep at night. Like a tattletale, I wrote all these sad things into my letters. Back then, I seemed to know that he most likely wouldn't write back. But I still hoped. During those 3 years when Shijin taught me calligraphy, I took quite a few strikes from his ruler. No, I suddenly understand, when Shijin taught Zhang Yuntan, he probably couldn't bear to strike her palm with the ruler. Zhang Yuntan put on her veiled hat, and Shijin personally escorted her onto the carriage. He returned to the pavilion, frowning, wiping his right cheek with his sleeve. There was rouge that had just rubbed off on it. Looking up, he saw me sitting there waiting for him, and couldn't help but freeze. Rainwater had dampened my hair at the temples, dripping down my cheeks and sliding down. His hand wiping his face stopped. I stared at him, tears uncontrollably bursting from my eyes. 3 years. I wrote you so many letters. Why didn't you reply to even one of them? He looked at me impatiently, Xiao Chan. I've told you I am very busy. Why can't you understand me a little? The words in my mouth came out more and more urgently. You are grown up now and should be more sensible. They're just a few letters. Is it worth throwing such a tantrum at me? I let out a bitter laugh. I saw everything that happened just now. With a snap, I shook off his hand and pulled out that old marriage contract. Shijin panicked and tried to snatch it away, but he couldn't stop me from tearing it to shreds. The wind from the river blew open the window lattice, scattering the fragments all over the floor. Like snow flying between us, he was always self-disciplined and composed, never easily disturbed, yet at this moment his expression was somewhat ferocious. I finally couldn't hold back the sob in my voice. Since you have someone you love, why didn't you tell me? It is not like I would cling to you. Jin's face turned deathly pale in an instant. He stood there stiffly, not speaking for a long time, holding onto my arm, unwilling to let go. I wiped my tears and calmed myself down. Back then, I had nowhere to go, and the Shi family took me in. You were gone for 3 years, and I looked after the household for 3 years. Let's call off the engagement. He gripped my wrist and wouldn't let go, saying word by word, Kui Zhengxi, I don't agree. He was clearly angry. He wouldn't even use my intimate name anymore. As we were at a standstill, someone knocked on the door to report. The road is slippery in the rain. Miss Zhang took a fall. Shijin released his hand, put on his cloak and started to leave, while still turning back to say to me, don't go anywhere, just wait here for me to come back. He pushed the door open and left without looking back, as if certain I would obediently wait for him. But now I no longer want to wait for him anymore. The small floral cloth bundle in my arms contained the old madam's private savings accumulated over the years. She gave it all to me tonight, along with that old marriage certificate. I picked up the umbrella and lantern I had brought and walked toward the riverside in the rain. I don't know how long had passed before I came to my senses and realized the half-worn lantern I brought had long been extinguished by the wind and rain. This lantern had accompanied me for 6 years. When Shijin first started teaching me lessons, there was one time he beat my palms until they were swollen. I was so angry at the time that I ran out to hide and cry. After crying until it got very late, I finally became scared. The deep alley entrance was pitch black like a man-eating beast. I ran forward in fear with my head down and crashed right into Shijin's arms. He was holding this very lantern, patting my back with one hand, his eyes full of concern. Even if you are angry with me in the future, don't run off like this. Okay, the lantern dies, the bond ends. I tossed the lantern on the shore and bent down to board the boat. The boatman was an old couple. Seeing that I gave them silver, they didn't ask many questions and cheerfully pushed the charcoal brazier over, letting me warm myself. Suddenly there was a commotion on the shore. The old couple craned their necks to look and sighed. Damn it, someone's actually selling their daughter. I couldn't help but crane my neck to look too. A young girl was being dragged forward by an old man. and during the struggle she was shoved to the ground. The old man yelled drunkenly, "Money-losing goods. I am selling you off today to go gamble and have a good time." The girl cried her heart out, "Rather than letting you sell me to a filthy place, I'd rather die and be done with it." The boatman was kind-hearted and couldn't help but get off the boat to intervene, but that old man glared and cursed. "If you are so capable, buy her yourself. Where does this poor wretch come from, sticking his nose in my business?" I touched the crude hairpin on my temples and sighed in disappointment. I lowered my eyes to look at the soft boots on my feet. They were sent back by someone Shijin had asked. The heels were inlaid with jade, and the toes were trimmed with gold even during my worst times. When I stayed up all night copying books for money, I never thought of pawning these boots. I thought it over and called the boatman to discuss. So he went out holding my soft boots, using both soft and hard tactics. "The jade and gold on these boots are worth quite a bit of money. Take your profit and scram." The old man's eyes gleamed with greed, and overjoyed, he shoved the girl toward the boat. I lifted the curtain. The lights on the shore were still burning. The old man tore off the jade and gold. The now worthless soft boots were casually tossed aside. They happened to land together with that half-worn lantern. No time to look any more. The boat had already gradually moved away from the shore. The old couple running the boat gave me a pair of old shoes. They were also busy bringing a bowl of hot soup, comforting the girl who had cried herself into fainting. I tucked the small floral cloth bundle the old lady gave me into my chest. "After 3 days on the boat, I'll be able to reach Liangzhou." Jiang Yuntan only had minor scrapes. Shi Jin patiently coaxed her with a few words and sent her back. Thinking that Xiao Chan was still waiting for him, he hastily turned his horse around and rushed back. Just now she had cried so pitifully, and even tore up the marriage contract. It was a loss of composure he had never seen from her before. He couldn't help but recall 6 years ago, when Xiao Chan first came to the Xia family, with eyes as big as black grapes, restlessly hiding behind grandmother and sneaking glances at him. His temperament had always been cold, yet in that instant he found it amusing. Shi Jin thought that one day she would become his wife, and that chicken-scratch handwriting of hers would inevitably invite ridicule, so he actually taught her patiently. The smiles on her face grew more and more, and she loved talking to him more and more. Xiao Chan was just like a clever little tattletale, saying she'd been tricked out of 2 chan of silver by a fake beggar, saying grandmother had secretly eaten all the pastries, and even asking if his constantly stern face meant he owed money outside. He had also thought that if they had children in the future, would they be as chatty as her? But after 3 years away, on countless nights with flickering oil lamps, what floated before him was still her vivid face. Shi Jin panicked terribly and rushed back to the pavilion at full speed. He pushed the door open with a swoosh. The candlestick on the table had long gone cold. The candle had burned to ash like someone's tears. The words Xiao Chan got stuck in his throat. He couldn't make a sound for a long while. A kind-hearted waiter passing by with tea pointed him toward the riverbank, looking for the young lady in the green dress from earlier. She went that way. Shi Jin mumbled his thanks. He hurried downstairs and searched along the bank. Suddenly he saw something. He froze completely. He felt his heart racing, almost all the blood in his body rushing to his head. His hands lost their strength, and the umbrella dropped to the ground. By the shore was that familiar old lantern, and Xiao Chan's soft boots. Shi Jin blinked in disbelief. The jade and gold on the boots were gone, perhaps snatched away by passers-by. Shi Jin clutched that worn lantern tightly. His heart swelled with pain, making it hard to breathe. A boatman called out, "The water's rising, good for sailing tonight." Shi Jin staggered to his feet, followed the voice, grabbed the boatman by the collar and demanded, "Where is the young lady who was here just now?" The boatman froze in fear at his blood-red eyes. While hesitating, he was startled again by a harsh shout. "I am asking you where the person is." Zijin was suddenly shoved hard by someone. "Are you sick or something? With rain this heavy, who can see clearly? That girl sat on the shore for so long. Maybe she just threw herself into the river." His face ghastly pale. He collapsed to the ground. The bloody taste in his chest surged up, overflowing through his throat. Without caring about anything else, He dove headfirst into the river. The icy river water coiled around him like a bone-deep affliction, rushing into his lungs, flooding his throat. Shijin reached out his hand, as if trying to grasp something. In his palm was only the bone-chillingly cold river water. Before he fell unconscious, he heard someone shouting, "Quick, save him." Someone jumped into the river. Liangzhou was located at the frontier, neighboring the Xianbei. Yet its people were simple and honest, and the common folk lived in peace. The Gobi Desert, beacon towers, solitary smoke over the vast wilderness. Ganzhou melodies, Liangzhou verses, the three refrains of Yangguan. This place was everything desolate that I had never seen before. I rented a small courtyard. The elderly aunties and uncles around all said, "The provincial governor is upright and proper, a rare good official. With him here, Liangzhou is governed so orderly." I'd heard people say before, Liangzhou is harsh, where even a letter from home is sometimes a luxury. If the common folk of Liangzhou had something they wanted to entrust to their relatives, they always had to seek out a few literate private school teachers and spend a few copper coins to ask the teachers to write on their behalf. There were only a handful of private school teachers to begin with, and they still had to teach during the day, so they simply couldn't squeeze out any spare time. They could only light lamps late at night and stay up writing for others. But there were so many family letters to write, how could they possibly finish them all? I thought it over and set up a small stall outside the door, specializing in writing family letters. Those grannies and grandpas were very warm-hearted. Before long, one told 10, 10 told 100. People coming to me to write family letters were always in an endless stream. What they pressed into my hands wasn't just copper coins, but also steaming hot wontons, fragrant chicken legs, and bright red candied hawthorns. Countless smiling faces affectionately called me Young Lady Kui and Miss Zhengxi. In those past years, I followed my parents' deathbed wishes, as if that flimsy marriage contract was the confidence I needed to live on. They never thought about it. What if Xiajin didn't like me? People shouldn't desperately beg for love from others in the first place. Relying on others will always lead to being abandoned one day. Only at this moment did I realize with alarm that I am not a kitten or puppy. I am a woman, a person of flesh and blood, just like Xiajin. I am not his Xiao-chan, nor am I his appendage. I am just myself. I've been called Xiao-chan for too long. I almost forgot. As it turns out, the name Kui Zhengxi is this wonderful, leaving the wrong person and going to Liangzhou. She was no longer anyone's fiancé fei or anyone's vassal, just Kui Zhengxi. In this name there was her own integrity, kindness, and independent life, no longer needing to shine through others' definitions. She herself was dazzling enough. That evening I was writing a letter by lamplight. Just as I was getting drowsy and about to extinguish the lamp, I suddenly noticed a dark shadow behind me. Just as I was about to scream, an ice-cold blade was already pressed against my throat. The person behind me said coldly, "Dare to move and I'll kill you." A not quite standard Han dialect accent. The mirror on the table reflected a foreign face. High nose bridge, deep-set eyes, slightly yellow beard. It was actually a Xianbei person. Me heart leapt to my throat, scared until my whole body was trembling. Outside the room, flames shot up to the sky as someone kicked open the courtyard gate. A group of officers holding torches surrounded us completely. The young man in crimson official robes leading them held a longbow. "Let her go, and I'll spare your life." The voice was somewhat familiar. That Xianbei person was very cunning. "Prepare a fast horse and escort me out of the city, or I'll drag her down with me even if I die." My legs went weak as he held me hostage and moved outside. My temples were soaked with cold sweat. The Xianbei person held me hostage as he retreated to the high platform, waiting for the horses to arrive. He was too tense, the force in his hand too great. My neck had already been cut by the sharp blade. Afraid the Xianbei person would hurt me, the young man below had no choice but to put down the bow and arrow in his hands. Both sides were at a standstill. An elderly woman appeared out of nowhere, holding up a large iron shovel and charging over, swinging it down forcefully at the Xianbei man's head. The Xianbei man was about to kick her away when the dagger in his hand loosened for an instant. In that very instant, I suddenly found some inexplicable courage. The sweat from nervousness made my palm a bit slippery. I gripped the hairpin in my palm tightly and stabbed it into the Shanbei man's eye with all my strength. Using too much force, the tail of the hairpin cut through my palm. My hand was covered in blood, impossible to tell whether it was mine or his. The Shanbei man covered his eye and let out a scream, swinging his blade down at me. An arrow like a white rainbow piercing the sun grazed past my temple hair and fiercely pinned through the Shanbei man's palm. The dagger fell to the ground before I could react. A second arrow following closely behind shot through his chest. Foul-smelling blood splattered out. Seeing such a scene for the first time, half my scalp went numb. That Shanbei man still wasn't completely dead, eyes wide with fury, and pushed me down with his other hand. I fell from the high platform, the wind whistling past me at high speed. The terror of weightlessness made me shut my eyes tightly. The pain I imagined never came. I fell into a broad embrace. Opening my eyes, the fierce wind blew up that person's crimson official robe. The young man, bright as the moon, caught me steadily in his arms. I finally saw his face clearly and recognized those deep ink-colored eyes. No wonder the voice sounded so familiar. The joy of meeting an old acquaintance in a foreign land surged up like a tide. Me eyes lit up, and I couldn't help but call out, "Master." The waning moon of Liangzhou illuminated the small courtyard like a pool of water. The person who had held me hostage earlier was a Shanbei spy. Fortunately, no one was hurt this time. I held the medicine the physician had brewed, held my breath, and gulped it down in one go. It was so bitter I nearly threw up. A well-proportioned hand appeared before me, offering several dried sour apricots. Luji looked at me with a smile. I had someone buy these just now, to get rid of the bitter taste. The bitterness on my tongue was diluted considerably, thinking of how I must have grimaced from the bitterness earlier. Looking quite unsightly, I suddenly felt a bit embarrassed. "Thank you, master." My gaze fell on his crimson official robes. He was now the governor of Liangzhou, no longer a master. I immediately regretted my slip of the tongue and stammered to correct myself. My lord," Luji chuckled. "No need to be so formal." The person who had mentioned Liangzhou to me was none other than him. The first year I served as a study companion for Zhang Yuntan. The master the Zhang family hired for the younger generation of the clan was precisely Lu Ji back. Then he was very thin, his whole person somewhat gaunt. He was a poor scholar from a humble family in Liangzhou, and no one knew how he acquired such learning. I heard that back then he was someone who had passed the imperial examination as the third-place scholar in the Golden Palace Hall. But he was too upright and offended someone in the power struggles, falling so low that he even lost his official position. The relationships among aristocratic families are as intricately intertwined as vines and branches. Clan members naturally support and help each other while excluding outsiders. I still remember the first lecture. Several young ladies from the Zhang family curiously peeked out from behind the screen. They watched with flushed cheeks, but I heard some young master scoff with disdain. Zhang Yuntan curled his lips. With such refined looks, how is he so poor he doesn't even have a decent set of clothes? Hearing this, I looked up from behind the screen. That person looked somewhat down and out. His blue shirt was washed until faded, with a patch on it, yet he stood with unyielding pride, tapping his wooden ruler indifferently on the desk. All the subtle contempt was thus lightly suppressed with ease. Less than half a year later, I heard he had returned to Liangzhou in anger. "I heard there is a girl in Liangzhou who writes letters home for people. I never expected it would be you." Lu Ji looked at me with a beaming smile, staring without blinking. By the moonlight, I noticed he had become even more refined and more heroic than before. The crimson official robe, few people could wear it as beautifully as he did. I exclaimed with a grin. "When you first spoke to me about Liangzhou back then, you never imagined we'd meet here in Liangzhou today, did you?" His gaze fell on my hands, and he asked hesitantly, "After so many years apart, do the chilblains still flare up in winter? These years, have you been well?" Back in those poor days, I washed clothes by the river. My hands were frozen terribly, swollen and purplish black, quite frightening to look at. Lu Jie had come across this once, Unable to bear it, he snatched the bucket away, wanting to wash for me. I was alarmed and anxious, my face turning pale. How could I trouble master like this? This isn't proper. A young lady's clothes really aren't convenient. He pressed his lips together without speaking. I thought I'd made him angry and frantically tried every way to ease the awkwardness. When I looked up, he had already walked away. But the next day after school, as I was putting away my writing materials, I found an unopened jar of chilblain ointment under the desk. That evening I applied the medicine to my hands, and both hands felt warm and cozy. I never expected he'd still remember after all these years. I self-consciously smoothed my wind-tousled hair. The chilblains have gotten much better. Later, Shiojin's maneuvering proved quite effective, and the family's finances weren't as tight as they were initially. The old madam felt sorry for me, and without my knowledge, hired 2 servants to attend to things. Naturally, there was no need for me to wash clothes anymore. The sky had grown somewhat dark. I got up to see Lujay out of the courtyard. The wind rustled through the leaves, swaying shadows rippling like waves. Mottled tree shadows spilled all over us. The moon in Liangzhou was truly beautiful, moonlight falling into his eyes. He suddenly stopped in his tracks, as if he'd held back for a long time before asking, "Are you married?" Lujay left long ago. My mind was still a mess even as I fell asleep. I lay down in a daze, unconsciously resting my left foot on my right knee and spacing out for a good while, until drowsiness finally crept in. Back when I sent letters home to Shiojin, I always saved them up to send together. I hid several letters in a cloth bundle, waiting until after school to beg the messenger to take them along. It was raining day after day in the capital then. Jiang Yuntan accused me of stealing her bracelet, and had people turn everything in my cloth bundle inside out. Miscellaneous items scattered all over the floor. Only then did she fiddle with the bracelet on her wrist, smiling carelessly. I remembered wrong. Turns out it was on my hand all along. Glancing at those letters on the ground, with just one look, the maidservants shoved me aside and snatched away the letters home. What a shameless little hussy, secretly writing letters to her lover. Amid their shrill, mocking laughter, I chased after them, trying to grab the letters back, stumbling all the way as I followed them into the rain. Some unknown from behind shoved me hard to the ground. Blood seeped from my scraped arm, Evriones scattered like birds and beasts. Jiang Yuntan passed by holding an umbrella, her embroidered shoes stepping unhurriedly, leaving behind the family letters scattered on the ground, soiled beyond recognition. Raindrops pattered down, soaking into my back as I crouched low on the ground. I felt somewhat numb tears mixed with rainwater streaming down my face. After a long while, someone held an umbrella over my head, Kui Zhengxi. I looked up with my face covered in rainwater and saw Master Lu's face. He had always been strict, and his mouth was quite fierce when scolding people. Those young masters who looked down on him at first were now all afraid of him without exception, worried he would scold me. I quickly lowered my head to clean up the mess on the ground, calculating how to get away. Who knew that through my thin clothing, a hand suddenly rested on my arm. It was a man's large hand with thin calluses on the knuckles from years of holding a brush and drawing a bow. Just as my hair stood on end in fright, he had already quickly helped me up and let go immediately. Lujay handed me the umbrella. He bent down on his own to pick up those family letters for me one by one. A few sheets were blown away by the wind and probably couldn't be retrieved. I stared at him blankly until he returned the things to me. Spread them out to dry. Perhaps they can still be restored to their original state. This was obviously his way of comforting me. The ink had already smudged. So how could they be restored? Seeing me lower my head, he added, "Don't be sad anymore. Actually, I am a bit envious." I didn't understand. My mind went completely blank, yet I still forced out a smile. Why would Master need to envy me? He turned his face toward me. Those eyes, dark as ink, made my heart panic. "I don't envy you. I envy the person who receives so many letters from home." My heart pounded wildly. I sat up abruptly. It was actually a dream about something from 3 years ago. Wiping the sweat from my forehead, I let out a long breath. I must be overthinking it. My gaze fell on the jade pendant on the table, the one Luji gave me before he left. He said if there was an urgent matter, I could take this to find him. Instantly, I felt ashamed again. Master Lu treats me so well. How could I think such things during this year? In Liangzhou, Luji has looked after me very well. I used to like crabapple blossoms, but due to the water and soil here they could hardly survive, so he helped me plant cotton roses in the courtyard, and somehow got me a beautiful little calico cat to keep here, named Xiao Li, who always chases after the hem of my skirt meowing. The old lady next door couldn't help but nag in front of me. I wonder when we'll get to drink at you two's wedding feast. I was so startled my tongue stuck out, waving my hands repeatedly. Master Lu used to be my teacher. You mustn't say such things. She smiled at me with squinted eyes. So what? He was your master before. Now he can perfectly be your husband. Good heavens, the folk customs of Liangzhou are actually this bold. Granny said some big shot was coming to town today and insisted on dragging me along to see the excitement. Through the dense crowd, I immediately spotted a figure that looked a lot like Xiejin. Just as I was hesitating, that person suddenly turned his face to the side. It really was him. I quickly lowered my head. After that day's falling out, I left in anger and never wanted to see him again. Who knew he would actually come to Liangzhou? I hid behind the crowd and secretly watched. I saw the sedan curtain lift, and out came a girl wearing a veiled hat, a beauty with a graceful figure. How could I not recognize this was Jiang Yuntan? I had just let out a cold laugh when I saw Xiejin extend his hand to her, his other large hand supporting her waist, carefully and attentively helping her down from the carriage. I couldn't help but recall a time before when Xiejin and I had an argument. He stubbornly refused to help me down, so I insisted on jumping down myself and ended up spraining my ankle. It hurt so much, I cried. Xiejin just looked down at my tears from above. He said coldly, "You can't even get off a carriage properly. How can you be so stupid?" So it turns out he could be this gentle when helping someone down from a carriage. It is just that the person wasn't me. Granny shook her head beside me, timely pulling me back from my thoughts. They said some handsome big shot came, but he is nothing special, not even as good-looking as our Lord Lu. Seeing I wasn't saying anything, she asked persistently again, "Don't you think I am right?" I smiled and nodded. Granny is right. Xiejin had already walked far away. I figured he probably didn't know I was here, so I couldn't help but breathe a sigh of relief. In the evening, I trimmed the lamp wick, half asleep, half awake. The scent of tung oil reached my nose. When I opened my eyes again, flames were shooting up into the sky. The small courtyard was instantly engulfed in a sea of fire, with choking thick smoke continuously pouring in. I poured all the tea water onto the curtains, tore them down, and covered my nose and mouth with them. I rushed forward 2 steps, then suddenly remembered that Xiao Li was hiding somewhere unknown. I frantically searched the entire room for it, but perhaps it was scared stiff. No matter how much I called, I couldn't hear any response. The thick smoke choked me until I could barely breathe. I finally found Xiao Li huddled under the bed, trembling. I quickly lunged over and picked it up. Someone rushed in, grabbed my arm, and led me out to escape. By the time the officers and neighbors helped put out the fire, the carefully arranged small courtyard had been destroyed. The cotton rose I had tended to for so long had only bloomed for one night before withering entirely into ash. I held Xiao Li, watching all of this helplessly. Me heart ached unbearably, tears silently sliding down my cheeks. This was my home, my own home. The person who had just saved me stepped forward. "Miss Kui, my master requests your presence." Through winding alleys with 7 or 8 turns, a carriage stood in the distance at a quiet street corner. I lifted the blue-green curtain. Light and shadow traced down along that person's dark brows and eyes, shining past his feet, separating him and me like the Chu River and Han boundary. His slender fingers reached over, brushing across my face, wiping away the ashes that had just stained it. Unhurried and leisurely, like teasing some amusing beloved pet. After a long while, Xiejin laughed very softly. "Little Chan, look how wretched you've made yourself. It is time to come back to my side." Xiejin's smile was calm, but his knuckles had turned white from gripping too hard. Me whole body went ice-cold, flustered. I stepped back. dodging that hand of his. But the moment I stepped back, my arm was grabbed. Sijin forcefully pulled me into his arms, his eyes stubborn. You've gotten thinner. Have these past days been very hard on you? Everything in the past happened for a reason. Let me slowly explain it to you. Little Chan, you must trust me. In this life, my heart only delights in you. I really didn't understand. How could he act so naturally, as if those past grievances had never happened? I pressed my palm hard against his shoulder to keep myself from falling onto his lap. But I don't like you anymore. Belated concern, explanations, and love when these things appear after their time has passed, they only make people feel disgusted. The night wind's chill drilled in through the cracks of my bones. Sijin's pitch-black eyes stared at me motionlessly. He stood up, his shadow engulfing my entire person. Why can't you like me the way you used to? I wanted to back away, but my arm was gripped tightly by him. Unable to move my body, I almost shouted from my throat. You burned down my courtyard just to force me back to your side. But I am no longer the little Chan from before. Sijin, you are so despicable and vile, yet you still fantasize that I would like you. He held me tight with a force almost crushing my bones. But you have nowhere else to go. As long as you come back, one day we'll grow old together with children and grandchildren filling the house. Sijin leaned in very close, his warm breath rapidly hitting my ear. I could no longer endure this disgusting feeling. Rage consumed my rationality. Almost without thinking, I pulled out the golden hairpin from my temple and stabbed it forcefully toward that arm before my eyes. But I really never expected that Sijin would rather be stabbed than let go. After the last incident of being held hostage by the Shanbei people, Lu Jie gave me a new golden hairpin. He had sharpened the pinhead to make it more lethal, so I could use it for self-defense. This hairpin easily pierced through Sijin's clothing and stabbed deeply into his flesh. Blood stained that piece of cloth, dripping down bit by bit along his arm and the hairpin's tail. Me hand holding the golden hairpin couldn't help but tremble. Just as I was about to pull my hand out and flee, Sijin had already grasped my hand, his expression unchanged. I owe you too much. If this makes you feel better, it is not bad either. I finally broke free from him. Are you insane? The color drained from Sijin's face. Yes. I went crazy after you faked your death and left. Seeing you smile at others drove me mad with jealousy. I let out a sigh and told him calmly. From the moment you chose Jiang Yuntan, from the moment you ignored every letter I sent, and every grievance I suffered, the bond between us wore away bit by bit. No one will wait for you forever. Sijin's body swayed slightly as he stared at me in a daze. I turned my head away from him and lifted the curtain, preparing to get down. He reluctantly called out to me, extending his arm to block my way. Just then, the sound of horse hooves rang out. Lu Jie rode up on horseback, his crimson official robe striking in the night. He gripped the reins with one hand and dismounted with practiced ease. Young Master Xie, with such conduct, do you think Liangzhou has no laws? Seeing Lu Jie had arrived, I lifted my skirt and jumped down from the carriage, moving too hastily. I happened to crash into Lu Jie. The green hem of my dress tangled with the gold thread of his official robe, and the jade belt at his waist rang out clearly. He caught me composedly, his gaze cold and sharp as he locked eyes with Sijin. Sijin let out a derisive laugh. Lord Lu, what great official authority you have. Xiao Chan and I have been betrothed since childhood. An unmarried couple reminiscing about old times hardly requires your interference. Lu Jie raised an eyebrow. What if I insist on interfering? Sijin laughed in extreme anger. Back in the day, we were at least fellow students. You should know not to covet a friend's wife, have you no shame? The old woman said Sijin was an important newcomer. Afraid of causing trouble for Lu Jie, I quickly tugged at the corner of his robe. He glanced at me, his expression somewhat hurt. Sijin took out a sprig of crabapple blossoms from his sleeve and held it before my eyes. Dew still clung to the petals. He had gone through great trouble to obtain it from thousands of miles away. His voice was hoarse to the point of being chilling. Xiao Chan, those who bullied you have all been punished by me. Come back with me. We'll plant a whole courtyard full of crabapple blossoms again, and this time they definitely won't wither. Before he finished speaking, I raised my hand and knocked away that sprig of crabapple. Petals scattered and fluttered between us, just like that torn-up old marriage contract from back then. You always said crabapple blossoms don't decay and feelings don't change. My embroidered shoe stepped on the flower branch, crushing the petals. But back then, Zhang Yuntan pushed me into the lake just to retrieve that bracelet you gave her. I nearly drowned, and the roots of the crabapple had already rotted away at that time. Blood dripped from Shijin's arm. He recklessly grabbed for my wrist, veins bulging at his neck. That was just an expedient measure at the time. But Lu Jie had already pulled me behind him. His fingertips hovered with perfect restraint half an inch from my shoulder, protectively shielding me. I plucked off the scattered crabapple petals clinging to the ends of my hair, letting the night wind blow them away. The marriage contract has been destroyed. We are no longer betrothed. Having said that, I turned and walked away. The moonlight stretched our two shadows very long. Luji's shadow stood tall and straight. The night wind was cool, his wide sleeves fluttering like a crane, carefully shielding me from the wind from behind. Shijin suddenly spoke. Luji, do you know she has a red mole on her shoulder? Luji stepped forward and suddenly covered my ears, but it was too late. I had already heard it, turning back. The moonlight illuminated the faint disgust in my eyes, like silver silk wrapped around Shijin's neck. He now realized he had lost his head, swallowed back his words, his eyes welling up with moisture. I no longer looked at him, only said coldly, "Don't make me look down on you." With the courtyard burned down, Luji escorted me to the government office, leading his horse and walking alongside me. The reason Shijin knew about the red mole on my shoulder actually has a story behind it. He was playful as a child, and his father was particularly strict. Once, when father took me to the Xie family, he was being whipped, his white clothes already stained with blood. I was young at the time and threw myself over him, crying to take a lash for him. It struck right on my shoulder. The elders of both families were scared half to death, scrambling to treat me. He stood helplessly outside the crowd looking over, tears in his eyes. From now on, I will treat Sister Kui well for the rest of my life. It is just that, at the time, neither of us knew. Tonight he would actually bring up this matter and say such unbearable words. When a silk handkerchief wiped across the corner of my eye, only then did I realize I had shed tears, feeling embarrassed inside. I couldn't help but change the subject. "So you and Shijin were actually classmates before, my lord?" Lu Jie hummed in acknowledgement. It just so happened we spent half a year at the academy together. As if falling into memories, a faint smile appeared at the corner of his mouth. "Actually, that year during the awakening of insects, I had seen you before." With his mention, I couldn't help but recall that there indeed seemed to be 1 year during the awakening of insects. Shortly after Shijin went out, spring rain came pattering down. Worried he hadn't brought an umbrella, I went looking for him at the school. Through the window, I glimpsed a group of people quietly studying. Back then, I often went to wait for Shijin, and among his classmates were some rascals who always liked to joke around. Over time, he got annoyed and hated being seen, so he forbade me from going again. At that moment, all his classmates were there, so I couldn't disturb them and could only hide beneath the window. Rainwater slid down from the eaves, soaking the tips of my shoes, making me shrink back involuntarily. Somino noticed a few lines of vermilion small characters in Shijin's book. Next to them was even a drawing of an adorably naive pig's head, and couldn't help but laugh. "Brother Shi, these annotations are really interesting, and looking closely, they even show some literary talent." Hearing others praise him, the corners of my lips were just slightly rising. Then I heard Shijin's voice laden with mockery. "What young ladies from boudoirs create are merely pastimes to kill boredom, nothing worthy of public presentation." I was deeply hurt, and the umbrella in my hand fell to the ground. Separated by a window, everyone was startled. What is that sound outside? I had just put down the umbrella and stood up to flee. The window lifted slightly, revealing a pair of refined and handsome eyes and brows. My eyes brimmed with tears, my cheeks flushed red with shame. He had already calmly turned his head and said, "It is nothing, just a little cat that knocked over an umbrella." That was the first time I saw Lu Jie. The long blurred memory gradually became clear. My heart immediately pounded like thunder. That person was actually you. Lu Jie smiled slightly. Yes, it was me. I couldn't help but twist the handkerchief in my hand. I truly thank you, sir, for helping me out of that predicament back then. So we had met that early on, and my curiosity about him welled up. But just as I wanted to ask more, we had already arrived at the government office. I couldn't help feeling annoyed this journey was far too short. Fortunately, the fire was controlled in time and didn't spread much to the neighbors on either side. It is just that some family letters that hadn't been sent out yet were burned. It is really quite a headache. After compensating with silver according to the law, I no longer had any spare money for repairs. The next day, as I sat worrying in the courtyard, the little boy from the old lady next door toddled over on his short legs. He raised his chubby arm up to my eyes. It was actually a heavy coin purse. I opened it to find silver at the bottom and copper coins strung together on top. The little boy mumbled, "Just now there was a young lady outside the gate who told me to give this to you. She was afraid you wouldn't accept it, so she asked me to tell you that this repays the debt for those boots from back then." I quickly grabbed the purse and rushed out the door to chase after her. I only saw the back of a young lady in the distance. As if sensing something, she turned her head. Our eyes met, and I couldn't help but freeze. It really was the young lady I'd rescued by the shore that night I left. When we parted back then, she said her maternal grandfather, who had doted on her since childhood, happened to sell tofu in Liangzhou. It is just that, after her mother died, her father forbade any contact between the two sides. This time, by some twist of fate, she'd actually come to the right place. Seeing her today with her radiant face, brand new clothes, and fuller cheeks, it seemed she was doing quite well, seeing me hurrying to chase after her. That young lady quickly waved her hands at me, then turned and ran off, disappearing from sight. The purse in my palm felt so hot it nearly brought me to tears. I let out a long sigh. At the very least, you should tell me your name when I returned. There was another person in the courtyard. Lu Jie had the day off today. He was wearing a blue robe, tending to some new flowers and plants. Little Li was originally curled up sleeping in her nest, but seeing him arrive, she jumped over and rubbed against the hem of his robe, meowing. I tidied up the courtyard a bit. These flowers and plants were all given by the grannies, hoping they'd cheer you up. My heart warmed and my eyes grew a bit hot. Thank you so much, Lord Lu. He shook his head and gently petted little Li, smiling at me. Between you and me, there is no need to be so formal. After speaking, he pulled out a thick stack of letters from his sleeve and handed them to me. There wasn't much to do today, so last night I restored the destroyed family letters for you. Take a look and see if they match up. Previously, to save time, and also to write more family letters at night. I would note down the key points for each person during the day. Fortunately, they were stored in a ceramic jar, so they were preserved. With trembling fingertips, I received them a total of 52 letters. Lu Jie had written them all in one night. Why are you crying? He hurriedly searched for a handkerchief, and little Li in his arms turned over in displeasure and scratched once. His wide sleeve slipped down, revealing a jade-like wrist bone with burn marks on it. I noticed with surprise that the location was almost identical to the scar on my wrist. Lu Jie smiled at me. It is nothing. I accidentally knocked over the candlestick last night and got burned. I sniffled and looked at him earnestly. Let me apply medicine for you, my lord. I sat down next to Lu Jie, dipped my fingertip in the medicine, and applied it to his wrist. The touch was warm, and my thoughts drifted far away. I couldn't help but ask with concern, my lord. You returned to Liangzhou and became the governor in just a few years. You must have suffered a lot, right? I had been somewhat curious about this before, but because of the difference in our status, he felt very distant to me, like the moon hanging high in the sky. So I kept a certain distance in my heart, but after spending so much time together, I felt he was actually very close to me. Lu Jie gestured toward me. Yes, I was slashed in the chest before, and nearly lost my life. I couldn't help but gasp and grabbed his hand. A hint of smile overflowed from his eyes. But it was precisely because of this that I gained the emperor's favor. When I came to Liangzhou, I was just a minor county magistrate at that time. The Shanbei launched a surprise attack. The defending general fled and abandoned the city, and I was slashed in the chest. I gripped his hand tightly and asked nervously. And then, later, naturally, I led the people to turn the tide of battle. The Shanbei were defeated, and the flames of war subsided. His expression was gentle and calm, looking more like a carefree young nobleman. Where was any sign of having suffered hardship? Even though these events were described so lightly, they still made an ordinary person like me feel shocked and stirred. I couldn't speak for a long time. Lu Ji asked me with a smile, "Did I scare you? Those are all old matters now." I shook my head without thinking. "I am not scared, I just feel a bit sorry for you." By the time I realized what I had said, it was already too late. My face flushed completely red. Even my ears felt like they were burning, standing up hastily to explain. "No, what I mean is," he chuckled softly and interrupted me, "then I'll regret not telling you sooner." After I tidied up the courtyard, someone knocked on the door outside. The visitors were a group of soldiers, playfully shoving the young soldier among them. The young man stammered, "I want to write a letter to my old mother at home." The people around started teasing loudly. "Your mum can't even read. This kid clearly wants to write to his fiancée." I smiled knowingly. "What would you like to write?" the young man stuttered. Nothing more than reminding his old mother at home to eat more and dress warmly, that he was doing well and she shouldn't worry. As he spoke, he paused, so embarrassed he closed his eyes. "Also, I want to tell Ah Chow to wait for me to come back and marry her." The young man's face flushed so red it looked like blood would drip. "Could you wait 2 days before sending it? I'll get my monthly pay tomorrow. I want to buy my mother a set of clothes, and then buy Ah Chow a hairpin." Everyone let out good-natured laughter. "That is our fault, dragging you here today by force." I nodded. "Delaying 2 days is fine. As long as they can receive your letter, your mother and Miss Ah Chow will surely be happy." The young man thanked me and turned to leave as if fleeing. I closed the courtyard gate, turned around, and the smile on my lips froze. Shi Jin was standing not far away at some point. His voice was very soft, like murmuring to himself. "If you had received a reply back then, would you have been this happy too?" The old wound from years ago was torn open by him again, but I surprisingly could no longer feel the pain. Indeed, I no longer cared. He continued speaking to himself. "Those letters of yours, I opened and read them all after you left. I didn't read them at the time only because I was afraid." I looked up at him in confusion. The twilight cast fragmented cracks on his face, reflecting the traces of tears about to fall but not yet fallen at the corners of his eyes. "I was afraid that if I read them, I wouldn't be able to stop myself from writing back to you. So I couldn't read them. It wasn't that I didn't want to. Father's death, mother's hanging were all caused by the Jiang family behind the scenes, and bringing down the Jiang family was like an ant trying to shake a tree. All these years, my closeness with the Jiang family was nothing but pretense. I was afraid they would harm you, so I could only pretend not to like you. But you are the girl I've been betrothed to since childhood. How could I not like you?" So he had such difficulties. Shock and sadness made me take a step back. "But I don't need your affection anymore, Shi Jin." A teardrop smashed onto the blue brick. His face pale, he said, "Sorry." I shook my head without a trace of emotion. "I don't even need your apology because I never intended to forgive you." Si Jin removed the jade pendant from his waist, choking hoarsely. "This is the token from when we got engaged. I've kept it with me day and night. Little Chan, grandmother and I both miss you so much. Won't you come back with me to see her?" I closed my eyes and said impatiently, "Don't call me Little Chan anymore. Have you forgotten my real name?" Just as he was about to speak, the closed courtyard gate was kicked open. A shrill voice shouted in exasperation, "Kui Zhengxi, you goddamn persistent bitch." Jiang Yuntan lifted her skirt and charged aggressively into my courtyard. Little Li had been crouching behind the stone bench watching Shi Jin and me, and now immediately rushed out hissing at her, but she impatiently kicked it aside, cursing little beast. I quickly crouched down to pick up Little Li and check on it. Fortunately, the kick wasn't hard. Little Lee burrowed into my arms unharmed, and only then did I breathe a sigh of relief. Zhang Yuntan swung a slap at my face. If you are leaving, then leave. Why are you still seducing young Master Xie? Shijin grabbed her wrist midway and said sternly, "What are you making a fuss about?" She shrieked hysterically. "How would you know her schemes? She just faked her death and jumped in the river to gain your pity." I stood up and slapped her hard across the face. Her hair ornaments came loose and the tail hairpin fell to the ground. Zhang Yuntan glared as if she wanted to tear me apart alive. "How dare you hit me? Do you know that my father is the newly appointed governor of Liangzhou?" Shi Jin pulled her over. "Stop making a scene. She and I were just reminiscing about old times." She took out something and threw it at me. "Reminiscing about what old times? What do you mean by hiding her jade pendant under your pillow? Do you think I am dead or something?" I caught it and looked. It was indeed the betrothal token from back then. The other jade pendant that belonged to me, engraved with the two characters Tongui, return together. While Shijin's was engraved with Baisho white-haired Fei grow old together. The night I left, my heart had already turned cold, and I forgot to dispose of this jade pendant. The engagement had long been broken off. What use was this token anymore? I raised my hand and smashed it hard on the ground. With a crisp shattering sound, the jade pendant broke into pieces, fragments of jade spinning and trembling on the blue brick floor. There was no such thing as returning together anymore. I coldened my face. That slap just now was to repay you for humiliating me before, and it is still not enough. Now I've smashed the jade pendant with my own hands, Shijin, and I have long had nothing to do with each other. Do you understand? Shijin's face seemed to drain of all color. His eyes stared fixedly at the broken jade. He repeated once more, "Do you understand what I am saying? If you understand, then stop bothering me." Zhang Yuntan glared at me hatefully. If anyone should hate, it should be me hating her. Shijin dragged her away in a daze. I squatted down to feed little Lee some dried fish, comforting her well. But in my heart, I was still startled. Governor of Liangzhou. This really is heaven's injustice. In the evening, Lu Jie had someone deliver a rare book I'd wanted for a long time. I took out 2 chan of silver for the errand boy. "Thanks for making the trip. Take this to buy some wine." He was so frightened he repeatedly declined. The Lord has been extremely busy with official duties these past few days, barely managing 3 meals a day. How would we dare sneak off to drink? I thought for a moment. Could you wait a bit? I'll prepare some late-night snacks for the Lord and trouble you to deliver them. The young servant wasn't very old. Hearing this, he blinked at me. "If you were to deliver it yourself, miss, I imagine the Lord would be much happier than seeing me." I couldn't help but give him a light punch. The more you talk, the more improper you get. In the end, I still carried the food box with him to the government office. Lu Jie was discussing matters in the front hall. The servant brought me into the study. The wind was strong in Liangzhou at night. I reached out to close the window, but accidentally knocked an ebony box from the desk onto the floor. Many papers fell out. I reached to pick them up, and when I saw clearly what they were, I froze instantly. The family letters that had been blown away by the wind in the rain that year were here. Intact. The writing had blurred, the paper wrinkled. Between each line, someone had added annotations with a brush. The strokes here carry anger, truly aggrieved to the extreme. These 2 words bled through the paper with ink must have been written with gritted teeth in the dead of night. Next to it was a drawing of a little cat with drooping whiskers. Looking at it, I couldn't help but recall how I caught a chill from the rain that day, and still had cold hands and feet the next day. Lu Jie didn't say much, only made the charcoal fire in the study burn more vigorously than usual. Looking down further to the end, the final line trembled with shaky handwriting. I'd rather write replies in her stead than bear to see her tears staining her face. Behind these letter papers were a few yellowed drawings. I stared at them fixedly, my nose tingling, my heart pounding in my chest. The door was pushed open, and Lu Jie hurried over. "Have you been waiting long? Why did you come all this way yourself so late at night?" Seeing me crouched on the ground looking at the things in the ebony box. He froze in place as if struck by thunderbolts. I stared at him blankly. Lu Jie's Adam's apple bobbed. I am sorry I frightened you. I steadied myself, the flickering candlelight falling into my eyes. I felt my eyes burning hot, as if they too were about to catch fire. No, actually, before I could finish, a bailiff shouted loudly. This is bad, my lord. Something's happened at the city gate. Lu Jie's brows immediately showed annoyance, and he was about to say something to me. I don't know what came over me, but at this moment I actually felt reluctant to part with him, afraid that if separated for even a moment, they would never be able to speak the truest feelings in their hearts. So I hastily grabbed his sleeve and asked first, "Can I go with you?" His furrowed brows relaxed. He gently nodded at me. All right. It was chaotic over by the city gate. Shrill cries and curses filled the air. A person lay in the middle, blood soaking the ground. Their face was covered with white cloth, but judging by the clothes, it was a young soldier guarding the city. Their body had been whipped countless times, covered in blood. My heart pounded with fear at the sight. Seeing Lu Jie arrive, someone broke through the officers and fell at his feet crying, "I beg you, my lord, to deliver justice." Li Juo was guarding the city today when that noble person arrived past the permitted time without proper documents, insisting on forcing entry. During the dispute, they whipped him to death with a horsewhip. By the carriage surrounded in the distance, the arrogant servant was still shouting brazenly, "You lowly commoners, do you know who my master is?" Lu Jie picked up the horsewhip from the ground and lashed it across the arrogant servant's face. A bloody mark split open on his face, and he fell to the ground in pain, instantly losing his arrogant air. Another lash came down. Lu Jie was clearly furious, shouting sternly at the curtain, "Get off that horse now." The curtain lifted, revealing a familiar face. I gasped. It was none other than Jiang Huai, Zhang Yuntan's father, the recently appointed governor of Liangzhou. His originally pale, beardless face now reeked of alcohol. "Ming Yuan, when you were down and out, it was I who temporarily gave you a position. That day you left in anger, saying something about how only the 2 stone lions outside the Zhang residence were clean. I've let that go, but now to repay kindness with enmity, that is not right, is it?" Jiang Huai smiled as he twisted his jade thumb ring. I merely returned late from a banquet outside the city, and with the wine going to my head, I was careless for a moment. Why must you be so harsh? I felt my stomach churning. A human life, in his eyes, could actually be connected with the word harsh. Such a nauseating manner, truly a household with no proper values. Lu Jie couldn't help but curse in anger. "So an official's hat has become your protective talisman. You read the books of sages, yet walk the path of beasts. What do you take human life and the law to be? Guards, take him away." According to the current dynasty's law, a regional inspector could first suspend a criminal official from duty and submit the reasons within 10 days. It is just that Jiang Huai had only recently taken office, so the account books couldn't be verified for the time being. I was worrying for Lu Jie when I suddenly noticed something that had fallen out of the sleeve of the person on the ground. Looking closely, it was a silver hairpin. Tremendous panic surged through my heart. I could no longer restrain myself, and with trembling hands lifted the white cloth that was covering it. The face of a young man who had lost too much blood appeared before my eyes. Just yesterday he was looking forward to today's salary payment, planning to buy his dear mother a piece of clothing and get a hairpin for his sweetheart. But now he had become a cold corpse. Me heart twisted in pain, and I trembled all over as I cried. Several familiar-looking soldiers walked over, their eyes all red. Simone handed over a few copper coins, choking up as they pleaded. "Miss Kui, this lad hasn't paid you yet, but could you? Please help him finish writing his letter home." I pushed his hand back and wiped away my tears, promising, "I will write it properly." Jiang Huai wasn't the only one from the Jiang family serving as an official in the court. Taking him down with just this matter alone wouldn't be easy. Unexpectedly, Xie Jin took the initiative to seek out Lu Jia. He brought out everything he had investigated over all these years: tax embezzlement, intercepting grain transport, labeling good citizens as bandits to seize their family wealth, reporting official farmland as wasteland to reoccupy the fields, Case after case, shocking to behold. Even the Xie family's fall from prosperity back then had Jiang Huai's hand in it. Xie Jin smiled and asked Lu Jie, "Do you still remember on our last day as classmates how you answered that policy essay question the teacher asked?" My hand grinding the ink paused for a moment as I listened curiously. Lu Jie chuckled softly. Better to cry out and die than to live in silence. Xi Jin nodded, with such words, "I'll trust you this once." His gaze lingered on me reluctantly. "There is something I want to say to you," so I got up and followed him out. When passing by Lu Ji, he didn't even lift his head, appearing calm and silent. In reality, his brushstroke went crooked, dragging out a long mark. I curved my lips and quietly tiptoed out. Xi Jin and I walked side by side through the hanging flower gate. It was spring turning to summer in Liangzhou, with wild roses falling all over the ground from the trellis. Just like the flower trellis we used to sit on when we were little back. Then I still had my baby teeth, eating the candy he gave me, when I unexpectedly knocked out a tooth. I cried for quite a while, wailing that no one would marry a girl with missing teeth as their wife. He reached out to wipe my tears and said childishly, "Then I'll marry little sister Kui as my wife in the future." Later, his family met with misfortune, and I wasn't in the capital, so we could only exchange letters across the distance. Coming to this day, severed feelings are hard to mend. Recalling those old times truly feels like another lifetime. Xi Jin clearly remembered too. His eyes moistened as he tried to pluck a fallen wild rose petal from my hair, but his hand froze in midair because I turned my head to avoid him. These past few years he has had his difficulties. That is true, but my grievances are also real. Actually, I've been stubborn since I was small. When I was young, my mother sewed me a little cloth cat, and I was so happy I held it all day and wouldn't let go. But one day, a distant cousin came to the manor, and seeing I wasn't there, played with the cloth cat for a while, leaving it unrecognizable. Even if mother helps me recover later, I don't want it anymore. In the silence, Xie Jin sighed. "Is there no possibility left between us?" I answered calmly. "No, it is already too late." He seemed to shed tears, turned around with his left hand pressed hard against the flower stand, and finally choked out, "I am sorry." I walked away a few steps, hearing him call after me with a question. "What about Lu Jai? Will you be with him?" I didn't answer, nor did I look back. After Jiang Huai was imprisoned, I made a trip to Li Jua's hometown, when news of his death reached home earlier. His mother wept all day, and her eyes had deteriorated. That girl called a chow cried herself into a puddle of tears. I handed them the new clothes and that silver hairpin, then pushed that letter from home over. "Li Jua was very concerned about you both in his heart, and surely hoped you would live well from now on." When leaving, I pressed a banknote under the teacup. That was a token of goodwill Lu Ji entrusted me to deliver. When I returned to Liangzhou, it was autumn again. A familiar figure stood not far from the city gate, hands behind his back, sighing. The servant boy teased from the side, "Why does the master sigh? Missing Miss Kui again?" Lu Ji continued sighing. "It is too late today. Perhaps I can only return tomorrow." I smiled and chimed in. "Who says it is late?" He turned around, his eyes warm and bright like starlight. During the time I was away, everything was settled. Jiang Huai had been executed, and his family members were exiled one after another. Xi Jin had long ago given Zhang Yuntan a drug that would cause her face to rot and fester. I heard that, on the day she was dragged away in the street, she went mad and stabbed Xi Jin with a dagger. That dagger was poisoned. Although the person was saved, that arm was crippled. And Xi Jin, having both cleared his father's name and rendered meritorious service, was at the height of imperial favor, yet he voluntarily requested to take up a post in Lingnan. Before departing, he wanted to see me one more time. Through the door, I was unwilling to see him again, only saying that Lingnan had much miasma, urging him to take care. He left outside the door. He left behind a pile of bundled letters. These were exactly the ones I had written back then, and now he had replied to every single one. But I didn't want to read them. So I turned around and threw all these letters into the fire. After Lu Jie saw this, he didn't say much. He just kept the corners of his lips curved upward all day long. The next day, Lu Jie had a day off, and he invited me to the government office. Under the window, a subtle fragrance floated in the air as he was brewing tea for me. As the tea steam curled upward, he passed me a small dish of dried sour apricots. Try this. It is 3 times better than what we had back in school. Even the dried sour apricots he gave me when we reunited weren't a coincidence, just because he remembered that I liked to eat it. I took the cup of tea from him, that day in the study. I wasn't scared, actually. I was a bit happy. He looked up at me indifferently, yet the tips of his ears turned red. I tilted my head in confusion. It is just that one painting puzzles me, the one of climbing a tree. When was that? Lu Jie calmly skimmed off the foam from his tea bowl, even earlier than that year's Jingja. I let out an "oh" and couldn't help thinking carefully, climbing a tree, climbing a tree. Suddenly it dawned on me. Back then I still had a playful nature, pestering Shijin to play hide-and-seek with me. He lost patience before even finding me and gave up. I hid alone in the tree until the sunset glow faded, feeling a bit scared. I wanted to come down but didn't dare. Just as I was crying and whimpering, I saw someone passing under the tree. I couldn't help but stick my head out and ask him, "Can you help me find Shijin? I can't get down." That person's voice carried a hint of amusement. "I am his classmate. If you don't mind, jump down and I'll catch you." I jumped down and was caught steadily by him. Because I was afraid Shijin would scold me for the impropriety between men and women. After thanking him, I pushed him away with my hand and ran off without looking back, not even catching a glimpse of what he looked like. Thinking of this, I stared wide-eyed in surprise. Lu Jie smiled at me. "Remember now, then do you still remember what I wrote on the painting?" I instantly blushed and lowered my head. Of course I remembered. On that painting he had inscribed a line, "If I could obtain the moon from the Toad Palace, I would wish to be the one who gathers the stream." So it was. Right at that moment. The red matchmaker star stirred. Fate was born in an instant.